Hey, this is Jake Webb with Protopia AI. This is the start of our new series on all things AI ML data privacy. Today we're going to be speaking with the one and only James Beecham of ALTR. All right, James,
Hey.
thank you for sitting down with me. Pleasure to speak with you. First off,
Yep.
congrats on the new promotion to CEO.
Thank you very much. It's been about a month and a half now, so still getting used to it, but having fun.
Nice, nice. Glad to hear. So, first question I wanted to ask you is, kind of what is your role at Alter? And talk to me a little bit about your role specifically adjacent to the AI space as well.
Sure. So I'm the newly minted out here at Altair, though I'm one of the founders, so I've been with the company from the very beginning. My previous role was on the CTO side, so was focused a lot on kind of leading R&D, working with some of the premier partners, customers, integrations. So it's been a little bit of a transition to, get out of the kind of day-to-day tech and kind of get into more of the business side of things, but I've got a good cast of and teammates around me, so it's been very good there. Alter as a company really focuses on data governance, data security. We traditionally started with more of the kind of transactional and enterprise on-premise workloads, but like many, kind of companies over the past few years, we've seen the migration to data into the cloud. And so we've been very aware of that and kind of have made some strategic changes over the past few years to make sure that we're ready to take advantage of that migration and have solutions that are ready. One of the challenging things for Alter a few years ago was we've been SaaS based from day one. So if you can imagine 5, 6 years ago being a SaaS based data security provider, trying to tell a bank who runs entirely
Yeah.
on prem to use you, it was kind of a crazy ask in some people's eyes. But fortunately, all those investments that we made in SaaS based tooling and SaaS based deployment have now paid off for the data migrations to the cloud. So I think as it relates to AI specifically, where we continue to kind of see intersection between data security, data governance, data privacy, and AI is really in companies trying to rationalize providing access to data that was once before kind of locked and kept away. It's always been the case that companies have collected sensitive information or operational information, but as you all know, it's kind of a relatively new trend to want to analyze that, expose that,
Yeah.
and use that. And so when we get brought into some of these AI type workloads, it's always an understanding, how can companies do this safely and how can they do it in a way that kind of fits current policies as they look to kind of amend them for cloud data workloads. So that's typically where we get brought in.
Nice. So there's definitely a trend more towards the SaaS and with new market trends of, hey, we have to do a lot more with less.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to me a little bit about kind of that bridging the gap of we will never trust anything outside of on-prem to gaining some of that trust to, all right, this is actually safe now.
Yep, I think there's been kind of we saw previously the first wave of cloud migration was applications going to the cloud.
Yeah.
So folks were keeping data on premise and they were moving applications up into AWS or Azure or even going into SaaS type applications as well. I think we're at the kind of second wave of cloud migrations now, and that second wave is data. And so you're seeing a lot of data get consolidated from disparate source systems into cloud data platforms, but you're also seeing, I think, a rise of these analytic workloads and these data-driven enterprises that are taking data that used to live inside of different silos, whether they were on premise or in individual
Yeah.
SaaS platforms. And they're kind of consolidating them now into centralized cloud data platforms, whether it be a data lake or a data warehouse. And I think what's kind of happening is folks are realizing that they were achieving a lot of their data governance, data security, and data privacy initiatives simply by having data in these separate systems. I could prevent my operational people from looking at sales data because I just didn't give them access to Salesforce, for
Yeah.
example. I could prevent HR people from seeing, product data because those two systems were completely separate product metrics versus employee metrics. With all that being consolidated into lakes or into data warehouses now, I think companies are beginning to understand the challenge of what it means to consolidate all of that data together. I think if you cross that challenge over with some of the financial challenges that we're seeing, in the markets today and going into 23 probably as well, I think you're going to see teams that are going to get asked to do more with less. Headcount is reducing, budget is reducing. And so one of the things that I think people are kind of latching onto is if I can reduce my operational overhead by not having to run on-premise systems and instead switch to SaaS-based systems, that kind of helps me achieve that do more with less initiative that they're being asked to do. And so one way to do that is to really leverage a lot of the SaaS-based tools. We see, Snowflake and S3 and Databricks are really kind of leading the way in this area, though I think some of those platforms still have some management challenges with infrastructure. But as companies look to use more third parties, again, to do more with less, that's really where automation and software is going to have to come into play. If you don't have an FTE any longer to do, ETL work for you, you're going to have to buy an ETL tool to do that.
Yeah.
You're going to have to replace people and scripts with full software solutions. And when you do that, it's going to cause new privacy and governance and security challenges. But I think it's just a fact of where the companies are today is you will see the adoption of more SaaS tools and you will see the adoption of more automation.
Oh, I appreciate that. So another trend that I've certainly noticed in the market is the, term data-centric AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all spend a lot of time building these fancy models, amazing models, and we've now sort of realized those models aren't really worth much if we don't have the correct data and the
Right.
correct access to that data. And, I think you come in with, all right, how do we get our humans the correct access to that? What have you seen in the market as far as, AI, ML, privacy, and how to go a step beyond of, okay, we've got this for, BI or analytics, but now how do we make it safe for training a model or getting it to our hundreds of data scientists that now need that?
Yeah, there is a distinction between the types of practices that you put in place for people accessing data versus machines accessing data. It might seem very similar kind of at the surface level, but there's a few kind of key distinctions there. One of the largest distinctions is when you have people accessing data, very rarely is a single person accessing terabytes or petabytes of individual records. They're more looking at aggregations of that data, or they're asking the data a question and letting the data systems answer that question and then use that answer to then inform a business process or a business practice. But when you look at these models, whether it be for training or for deployment, they are consuming every single record that you give them access to, and they look at all of this data. And so there's a little bit of a different kind of fear for, and maybe fear is too strong of a word, but just there's a heightened sense of understanding that we can't screw this up. If we want to continue to leverage these types of technologies, AI in particular, we need to kind of put that foundational governance layer in place. And I think the data-centric AI kind of movement that you're referring to, we saw something similar in data security and data governance. There's an entire kind of Gartner category called data-centric security. And it was really the understanding that while putting security at the network layer or at the application layer was helping in a lot of these ways, the bad guys and girls were just finding ways kind of around those moats and those walls, and they were still getting access to the data. And so the thought was, well, if we can protect the data itself, then as that data gets used and gets accessed, those securities and governance and privacy practices can go with the data. And so I think what you're going to kind of begin to see on the AI side is kind of folks thinking about that same way, which is how can we put protections over the data itself so that I don't have to worry about the downstream implications of exposing these massive data sets out to models. If you kind of think about how a model is built and trained and deployed, there's kind of two aspects to data access, right? There's still the data scientist that needs to access a subset of the data to understand what is its distribution, what is the format of this data, what's the quality like, can I trust this data? So you still have to give a human access to do that. And I think that's a topic that has been thought about for a while. There's solutions, like ALTRs out there that help solve those problems. But then what we hear next is, okay, so the humans saw the, couple hundred records that they needed. They understand what the input looks like. Now let's go turn this model loose. We want to run it out, in some cloud platform, or we want to have a SaaS provider run this model. But now they want to either copy, a petabyte of data over to do that or directly access it. And so I think the data-centric AI, movement or kind of paradigm shift is going to have to also contemplate how data-centric security can layer into that. And I think there's some really, special work going on with, companies like Protopia, which is one of the reasons why we continue to kind of want to partner with you all and introduce you to folks along the way is, being able to put changes in the data such that data is usable for a machine, but not usable for a human. I think when you marry the two types of security together, it's a perfect fit together. I think it really gives companies the comfort that they are controlling what their humans are able to do and able to access, and they can still do their job and still look at data and profile it and sample it.
Yep.
But then when they go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to turn this model loose on a petabyte of data, that petabyte of data has been obfuscated and reduced down to its minimal set of information required to do the task at hand, such that if there ever is an inadvertent exposure, or a breach of that data, it's useless to a human being. And so I think what you're going to see and kind of what we've been pushing is data-centric security will find its way into kind of data-centric AI, and it'll be kind of a sub-layer within there, just like data security is a sub-layer within the data governance kind of umbrella. I think that's kind of one thing that we've been hearing and seeing in the market, especially in financial services. That's been the place where we see it the most.
So I was curious your thoughts on something we see in the market all the time. We talk to a lot of financial services, insurance companies, people that have highly sensitive data. And a story we typically hear is, I've got hundreds of data scientists. I'm sitting on a treasure trove of very valuable data, but because of the sensitivity,
Yep.
I maybe have a handful of data scientists that I even trust. So the big problem I have is, I've got 100 to 150 data scientists that it may take 4 to 6 weeks to even get access through the governance like ALTR, but then half the time that answer is no. So we don't have the freedom to create, iterate, fail,
Right.
like a lot of engineering teams need to do.
Right.
Is that something you see in the market?
It is, and it's an unfortunate, I think, symptom of both, the regulatory and compliance landscape that especially financial services have to operate in. And by the way, it's good that they operate that way because we do need to protect that information, especially with the workloads that they have. However, as an engineer, it can be very frustrating to not be able to do your job. You come in, you're very excited about these jobs, these tasks, but then you kind of hit that wall, and that wall begins to kind of grind you down, and you ultimately lose faith, or you kind of lose the passion or the mojo. What we've seen companies do is I think they're beginning to understand the competitive nature of data. It's certainly helping them both drive top line and kind of reduce costs within the business. As you look at trying to provide access to data, I think what's worked successfully for us, kind of going back to some of the topics around SaaS and automation and kind of tooling, is spend the time up front to build an automated layer that you can audit and that you feel comfortable with presenting to your higher ups and your compliance folks. And that layer kind of has 2 or 3 pieces to it. You need to be able to prove that you can always tell what type of data your data scientists or your machines are being able to access. So that's leveraging classification type features from either tools like ALTR or natively inside the data stores themselves. I think you need to also be able to then clearly articulate the business need for the access to data and be able to document that. And that middle piece then feeds into something that I think is very, very new and special that Protopia is able to help provide, which is then provide the most minimal kind of cross section or subset of that data needed to do that business purpose. And if you think about doing that manually, it would seem hard to do, seem very difficult. But the nice thing is all of these toolings together, whether it's ALTR's data governance or Snowflake's data platform or Protopia's stained glass factory, all of this can be automated. And so I think the goal that these companies should have is this process is going to want to happen over and over and over again. So figure out how to automate it and get it working once right. Get that approved, get very comfortable with that, and then you can go ahead and open up those data sets to those end users. If you continue to have just that kind of initial subset of the trusted, three wise men or whatever your inner circle is, you will continue to hit roadblocks and consolidations, and you won't move as fast as you can. You're making investments in the other 197 data scientists that you have in your company. And you need to think about how you're going to leverage those folks. And the answer can't continue to be no. And one way to really, really solve that from what we've seen, and sometimes it does take individuals at the organization that are maybe a little bit more mature in their engineering or their automation. And so maybe that's why financial services kind of continues to be the place where we see this. But it's building those automated workflows in a way that is audited and controlled. I think that's what's going to help customers be able to utilize that data. If you don't do that up front, you're going to continue to have the same problem as we're going into 24 next year. So I think automation, layering the tools together and getting it to work once correctly for a use case, getting that use case and that process validated
Yeah.
by everybody above, and then be able to provide them an audit saying, what I showed you 6 months ago is still working. We've had no anomalous access. Every business process has created a Protopia output for the model. That model is only accessing this subset of data. Here's the 19 people that saw the plain text data. Here's how much they saw, and here's why they saw it. If you can prove that over and over again, that's your ticket forward.
Very well said. So earlier you were talking about doing more with less and kind of getting over the hump of trust and moving towards SaaS, gaining some of that trust. What are some of the other challenges you see in that area of getting companies to, move in that direction?
Well, one of the ones that I think continues to come up, that's one of the scariest ones, and we hear it across all industries, not just financial services, but healthcare and logistics and everything, is just cost of products. I think there's, again, with the financial pressure that we're seeing out in the markets today and the reduction in headcount and budgets, cost has certainly become, a topic that's right at the forefront. Typically security and privacy and governance, while they have healthy budgets, are usually some of the smaller, budgets within a company. And also one of the challenges that they have is these tools and processes typically have to be done and used in-house. So I think one of the advantages that SaaS-based governance, security, and AI type providers are having is being able to offer those kind of entry level or competitive price points that let you kind of try before you buy or kind of grow slowly with these projects. So what I was mentioning earlier about, if you're going to find a way to understand how to make that first automated layer so that you can begin to utilize the rest of those data scientists that you have in there. If you start small with a project to kind of prove to your higher ups that you're going to be able to do this safely and securely, in order to do that, if you need $1 million, it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to do that. And so that's why I think some of the new business models that you're seeing out in the market are going to help companies do that, right? With a platform like Snowflake, if that's where you choose to consolidate all of your data, you can spend $0 a day on Snowflake, or you can spend $1 million a day on Snowflake. It's up to you. And so you can kind of begin with one small set of data and one small process and move it there. Tools like ALTR that offer a free plan and zero up pricing as you grow makes it very simple to add those first initial kind of trusted data science users in there to start to begin to figure out how we're going to automate this process. And then, using tools like Protopia and the Stained Glass Factory, being able to transform data sets for individual models, or just kind of work on the few subsets that you want to right now, to be able to achieve this goal of automation for a price point that's, you could maybe even put on a credit card these days, I think is going to be very important for folks. We continue to hear people in the market, especially on the ALTR side, I'm not going to sign up for 6 figures and 6 months of professional services. I want to just get in there. I want to use the software. I want to try it. And if I want to use it for 5 users for the next year, then you should be able to meet me, at my needs there. And I think, ALTR has been doing that for a while now. Snowflake does that. I know it's something that you all, are focused on helping teams get going there. So I think start small, but start mighty. And, if you're working with a vendor that wants to sell you a very expensive solution just to get started, you should really question whether or not they have kind of your interest in mind. And so I think that's price pressure, something that people are going to come under. And these SaaS-based tools that allow you to kind of grow as your use cases grow should be top of mind for folks.
James, thank you so much for taking some time.
You're welcome.
Sincere pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much.